Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100.
Or Mott's. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Lost Signals Reviews, discusses the AFI. Today, the South will rise again, as we discuss number 6 on the AFI, Gone with the Wind. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Thurlow.
Howdy, y'all.
Christopher Morgan.
The South lost. Get over it.
And Stephen Ramosi.
Frankly, I don't give a damn about this movie.
Well, I feel that it's rightfully me that I host this because I am the progeny of the Confederacy, one quarter of it.
He's a good Southern son.
Yeah, my grandma was Noki, and I had probably people flooding on the.
What's funny is I actually did my ancestry a little while ago, and I did have the families that like marry into each other. It's so there's a little bit of everything in me. But who has a funny logline for us?
So I thought you had one, but so what I came up with was, or say what I wrote down was, a Karen in the South is fawned over and is fawned over by other Southern races in the Civil War.
I think for such a wholesome movie that we're going to do, that Karen's pretty offensive. But nonetheless, Chris, would you like to talk about the plot of Gone with the Wind?
I would like to talk about the plot. Gone with the Wind is a character study of a sociopathic Southern belle named Scarlett O'Hara. The film follows her as she manipulates her way through the Civil War and beyond to obtain the love of Ashley Williams, son of a neighboring plantation owner, as well as to gain finances to save her family plantation of terror. She marries 3 times, once to make Ashley jealous, and he dies, which the title scroll or the narrative tells you that this person who is considered a weakling in their society did not die on the glorious battlefield, but of pneumonia and measles.
When you say he dies, you mean her husband, not Ashley.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Her husband dies.
Charles something is her first one, right?
He's a business owner for money, and he dies. And during this time, she meets a man from Charleston named Rhett Butler, who for some reason spends the entire movie trying to get her love to him. And she finally marries him to save her plantation of terror. After Ashley finally gives her the final "I don't love you" in that way or whatever, somebody tells Scarlett that her dying friend who's married to Ashley says, be nice to what's his name, Rhett Butler, because he loves you so.
Captain Rhett Butler, buddy.
And she says, I love you, Rhett. And he says, frankly, my dear, don't give a damn. I'm sorry.
That's not what she says to him even.
They have a daughter and she dies. So Rhett leaves and she's wondering what she's going to do. And she said she looks at the camera and says, I'm going to make Tara great again, and I will win his love back, just like a perfect sociopath.
And she does in the sequels, in both of them.
I'm sure she does.
Thank God.
Tomorrow's another day.
I mean, I'm being very glib about this, and it's because, like, the first half of the film, I thought the first hour and 10 minutes was really well paced. It went, like, really quickly. And basically, from the time they got to Atlanta, it slowed to a crawl. The first half is it has basically most of anything of interest in it. The second half is a bunch of people talking from scene to scene to scene. And the problem I have with this film is the film is about Scarlett O'Hara. She is in basically every single scene of this film.
She fucking sucks.
Really terrible person. The film is about her. Everything that happens around her and in service to her. She does nothing out of altruism. It is completely out of her own selfishness because it is about her. The narrative is about her. Because of that, in my opinion, the narrative is about her. I'm giving this a 0.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, I gave this a lot of thought.
Really angry.
No, seriously. I basically went through this going, is this movie about anything else but this person? And it's not.
I mean, you're right. It isn't that. But
In every scene where she's not in, they're talking about her in some way, shape, or form. It is. I did not want to come in here and hate on this movie because I don't like this movie an awful lot. But I gave this a lot of thought. I took a lot of notes, except for like the second half of the movie, in which case I was eating my
Second half.
to stay awake. But no, seriously, I don't want you to think this is arbitrary. I've given it a lot of thought. I've probably given this movie a lot more thought than movies I liked a lot more, because I was really trying to not give a low score just to give it a low score. And I realized, no, it's about a truly contemptible person. So I'm giving it a 0.
Have you ever seen the MTV show My Super Sweet 16?
No.
I haven't, but I imagine that that show is like what Gone with the Wind is about.
At least the first half.
Her issue is that the Civil War is happening. My party's ruined because the Civil War is happening. The Civil War is almost non-existent for this film. It's about Scarlett O'Hara being upset that her plans for life are ruined, which is why I love it. Because here's the thing is, Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara have perhaps the most realistic romance I've seen in a movie since A Marriage Story.
Okay.
Both of them love each other at different conflicting points. You can understand why they're drawn to each other because they're very similar people. It's just that it's a relationship that will never work out because they're so similar. And it's actually fascinating to me. It's overlong. There's a point I really want to make that oftentimes there's the argument between film and the novels they're based off of. And if anything, Gone with the Wind is an example of when a story is too faithful to a novel. That what works in a novel doesn't necessarily work in film, pacing-wise, story-wise. So both, at times it's incredibly dull, but at times it's tragedy porn. Like, all of a sudden, within a half an hour of the film, I think the daughter dies, the sister-in-law dies, and Rhett Butler leaves, and it just seems that
lesbian lover dies at the end.
So it doesn't work, but because they tried to stay so faithful to what the novel, where in a novel form it would work. But that's I might give it a 2 overall, because I think that the relationship angle actually works for me, oddly enough, and narrative-wise. But
all right, I'll be brief, Steve, because I want to speak. Chris, I'm not going to give it a 0. I would give it, like, if we're doing decimals, like a 1.5, which might be over the line for a 2. Like, for the parts in which the narrative is engaging, yes. But it is bloated. It's overwrought. It's overdone. Like you said, they tried too much. I guess at the time they wanted to adapt it the most one-to-one ratio they possibly could for the novel, and that's not a good choice. And so that drags down the plot, just like narratively. Like, I don't want to say like academically, like analyzing the story. There's too much there. There's too much going on. There's too much fat on the bone, if you will. A lot of it should have been trimmed. So while I think it doesn't deserve like an absolute null, I think what is there, like maybe limps over the line for a 2, but I could dial back to a 1. So with that, Sivo, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to probably agree with you for a 1. I agree with a lot of what you said there, Scott. Ian, to speak to what you said briefly, about how they're so similar. It's really interesting. I feel like Rhett Butler says that they're so similar so much that you are like compelled to believe it as the audience. Like, he says that probably 8 or 9 times throughout the fucking movie. And you're like, oh yeah. I guess they're so similar. But like, he actually proves himself to be much less or much more selfless than she is throughout the course of the movie. And I don't think they're all that similar, to be honest. But he does keep saying it, and I at some point towards the end of the movie I was like, he's really trying to convince me of the fact that
He
they
might be trying to convince himself as well.
yeah, oh, yeah, of course, and like by definition, like that's what he's trying to convince himself of.
The heart doesn't always follow what the best path is.
Right, and I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying that he didn't believe it himself because he had convinced himself to do it, but like, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I found Scarlett to be a very, very selfish person, and Rhett Butler, while also a selfish person, was not nearly as selfish as she was, even though he actually, I feel like he lived his life to some degree how he wanted to, and how he wanted to live his life. And I think she did too. And I think that's what he saw in her. But like, I think how he wanted to live his life was like helping people when they needed help. And how she wanted to live her life was like not fucking helping anybody and not giving a fuck about anybody else. And like, you know, I think that's what he saw in her that was like similar between them. But I don't think that makes them similar people. Right. And, you know, outside of that's I guess that's more like goes into the
They're both beautiful brunettes, though.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
Well, delve into it.
Like, yeah, exactly. They had this very like on the outside, they both felt like characters that meshed, but like honestly, he was like a scoundrel, and she was never really that either. She always like
He's a lovable
wanted
rogue.
herself to be like this, like
he's actually legitimately Han Solo.
What's that?
He's Han Solo.
He is. He's the early Han Solo, right? Like,
that's cool.
but without a real Leia, I guess. But you know, like to be honest,
it would have been Leia if Star Wars wasn't so sexist.
Yeah, I guess so. if both of them weren't so sexist in different ways.
Sure.
But like, I'm probably gonna give this a 1. It was a story for sure that made sense, for sure. It wasn't all that compelling to me. I didn't like it all that much, but it was a story that kept itself together. So I'm probably gonna come down on 1.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going to say this. I mean, because I'm actually going to put my praise for it in another thing, because it is not devoid of value. I'm just talking as a narrative scope. But the one thing I did notice is, for as much of a scoundrel Rhett Butler was, I mean, they were in a somewhat abusive relationship, but finally he got his
Yeah, I mean, Scarlett treated him like shit.
whatever ego he had left, and said, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Seriously, I mean, I did not give this 0 lightly. It probably would, if we weren't having a binary system, I probably would have given it a 0.5, but it is because I didn't view, it's just because the whole thing was about her. And
Chris, if I may interrupt for a second, though, I think it's undoubtable that you can actually see the transition of both Scarlett O'Hara through the events that and how they reflected upon her, and Rhett Butler as well. And I think that it having a fairly cohesive arc throughout the course of a thing should elevate it above a 0. Whether you like it or not, you can definitely see the change in Scarlett O'Hara from the opening scenes when she's naive to her embitterment, to her realization of that this person. This will go to themes a little bit too, which I'm about to discuss. But the idea of her realizing that Ashley isn't who she thought he was, and that Rhett is actually more in line with who she should be. Like there's a narrative arc to it.
It follows through, is what you're saying.
I'll tell you what. I mean, there is a narrative arc. I don't think it's a strong narrative arc. I think that her changes can just change the dynamic of her self-service. But there is a narrative, and it is a little, because she is, affected by the outside influences, I will give it a very soft one.
Mhm.
This would be a point. This would be a point. But no, you make
We do ceilings, not floors here. So
Mhm.
Chris, I'll say it this way. This movie is 4 hours, right? I'll give a 0.25 to each act in those 4 equaling the 1.
point. All right.
It's not devoid of a plot. Like, it's not like you can't understand it.
But
by the way,
the-
I'm having mint julep right now.
Yes,
but
of course
the
you
thing
are.
is,
In honor of the,
for me watching this, I just saw it being. I'm like everything to me. The reason I give it a 0, and I'll give it a 1. I'll concede that you guys are right.
It's not devoid of a plot.
There is a narrative, but when I'm sitting here watching this thing, I'm like, it's, like I said, it to me it was more of a character study about a truly loathsome person. But
Sure.
I
kind of agree with that,
You're right.
actually.
There is a narrative to it, and because there is a narrative to it, I will give it a 1.
yeah, it's very hard to get. I think it should be very hard to get a 0 on.
Yeah,
narrative.
you might not like it, as you said, but like, I mean, it's not like you can't. It's not like it's indecipherable to understand. So that's all. That's
Yeah.
my final thought.
Ian, you're sticking with 2?
I am sticking with it too because again, I felt it was a very realistic portrayal of romance.
That's
Anyway, but that's my embittered. You're more romantic than I am in life.
moving on.
Anyway, I'm on to themes. So, yes, this is a racist film, not just against black people, against Irish people. I am Dada Irish.
Oh, I love me land, and also Scarlett. Don't forget your Lucky Charms as you're riding back to Tartar. Yeah.
It is inherently offensive, and it is also
Yep.
like on the surface. I'm going to argue here, on the surface, like a monument to Robert E. Lee that was erected in the 70s, and not back then. Then you can see its arguments for the nobility of the South versus the Union. However, I'm going to argue 2 extra points here. One is I don't think they ever took this movie seriously because there are scenes in there which are ridiculously funny and almost. There's a scene from Airplane where the airplane crashes through the windows of the terminal, and there's a scene in this where there's a image of Jesus.
Sherman's March is happening.
And the shells are coming down, and the stained glass bursts through while the priest is reading off the last rites people, and he just continues. It's actually a scene from Airplane, but done in this thing. But the more serious point here, though, is that if you view Scarlett O'Hara as a representation of the South, you see that she actually embodies nothing of what the ideal of the South is. She's selfish.
Nothing.
She's dependent upon both the slaves that she grew up with throughout her entire life, but also after slavery's end, she's dependent on convicts, helping out to. So she needs free labor. What it actually is that Ashley represents the ideal of the South, her romanticized ideal of the South, and that Rhett Butler represents the North. That he is the or what the South imagines North to be, a capitalist scoundrel who is interested in profits over honor. He does fall into honorable things when it actually personally affecting to him, and it's that throughout her life she needs to she is attached to this concept of the noble South through Ashley, and she then decides that in the end that her as the representation of the South itself, not the ideal but the actual existence of the South, really needs the unification with the North. And I actually think that kind of is threaded throughout this. And I don't know if I'm correct. I don't know if that was the intention, but I actually saw that as an underlying kind of there was always this kind of sarcastic look at the honor of the South throughout this. Even if at times it kind of glorified it, at times it didn't, and at times it mocked it.
Well, the problem is this era of cinema. And like, let's face facts. All right, this I was thinking a lot about this. This in a lot of way reminds me of Titanic, because I remember when I heard about it, I was like, oh, you got to see the Civil War, the burning of Atlanta. I mean, obviously, where things are being fair, watching it HD 90 years later, it's not going to be 80 years later, whatever it is. But the thing is, the spectacle of it was front loaded, whereas like Titanic, the spectacle of it was back loaded. And at the heart, it really is like a very bloated, very simple love story. But the part I'm getting at is this era of film, the difference between self-aware camp and the spectacle nature of the vivid color and everything. There's a certain amount of is it are they not taking this seriously, or is it just the style of filmmaking? Whereas I think Scott and I will both agree that neither of us like Wizard of Oz, but to me, empirically, it's a good movie. I mean, it understands what I think it really understands what it is. Therefore, the camp, because it's this magical fairyland, is a part of it. And then, I don't like, there's a lot of films that like I don't necessarily like, or I do like, that maybe might be a little corny or might be a little over the top because of the era of the film. So that my only question to you is,
But here's the thing: is Red Butler is the antithesis of the Southern hero, and he's the main
anti-Southern gentleman.
Yeah, but the idea is like,
I get what you
why
mean.
is he the prominent figure in this, and Ashley, who is the glorified Southern, the ideal, is completely shown to be ineffectual throughout this.
And you got a point, because as the Yankees are moving in Atlanta, he's hosting a little gala up there and basically brushes off. Yeah,
I don't know. Like I almost feel like this is like the reason that people make fun of stuff like this, because I almost like look at this movie and I'm like, oh, they're taking it seriously, things that shouldn't be taken seriously.
I'm quite certain that a favorite of Scott and mine, I'm sure some of you, Men in Tights. When Loxley comes back.
We from Georgia.
Like, no, that's the obvious one. But when he comes back to his household, and like, what happened to my father? What happened to my mother? Oh, they died. What happened to the dog? What happened to the dog? Ate the cat. What happened to the goldfish? Yeah, and all that. I feel like that's actually a 100% parody to when Scarlett O'Hara comes back to her home.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. I feel like that.
But I think that on a
we've seen. Let me just say this. Like, I guess I feel like we've seen so many like parodies to this type of thing where it's like no one can ever take this seriously because it's such a fucking joke, and the way that they do it is such a joke. But like, I feel like this movie,
the film wanted to do that.
The things that you're viewing as parody were taken seriously while they're making the film.
The parody angle of it was kind of my first point in this, and kind of more of a joking point. The idea is, though, that Ashley and Rhett and their portrayals kind of go against the ideals of Southern glory, and I don't think that. I think that that's a stronger argument to it.
Like, Scarlett is what she thinks the ideal should be, as opposed to what the reality is in these two.
Scarlett is neutral to this. She is the actual South, which
Rhett
is not a glory thing. It is a vein. It is a person. It is interested self-preservation, and who's attached her entire life to Ashley, which is this ideal of nobility who doesn't actually live up to it ever.
Yeah.
Sure. The person that you're supposed to, I don't know if you're supposed to identify with Ashley or Rhett. I think probably you're supposed to identify with Rhett, right? Who is a rascal.
But who's the antithesis of the Southern gentleman?
Yeah, for sure. Like it's the idea of like, it's a bold new world, which in 1939, great. You nailed it after fucking 60 years. Good job. But like, I like, you know, what is this like? What is this film saying? Like, outright, it's like there's this loss of
Sense of loss.
the traditional South, right?
But
And,
who? Scarlett felt that loss? She never had that. She was always who she was, and which is why you dislike her. She never represented anything about the South. It's only Ashley and his wife, who name I forget,
Melanie.
because she was such a
Melly.
one of the worst characters I've ever seen in cinema.
Really?
But,
I didn't mind her as much. Like I hated her much less than fucking Scarlett. That's for sure.
But Scarlett's a person.
I agree. Oh man, it's tough because like
Scarlett's a fucking caricature.
No,
they all are, like to a degree. Like that's gonna be my argument, and we'll maybe get into it as we get the next two questions. But with regard to themes, I'm gonna have to give it like a somewhat begrudging one, because like it goes back to like the fact that it's adapted from like the spirit of the novel. Like, this is a dying civilization, yeah, and they certainly portrayed that. We might not agree with what the messages are saying, but it's not like it has zero message. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, the South will come again. Nope. It's not A. It's not going to happen, and B. It shouldn't happen anyways. But that's what it's portraying. It's like some romanticized, idealized version of this very specific time period, in which really didn't really like. Even that romanticized ideal didn't actually exist, or only in like our memory of America.
So to build off of that, you either rate as me, which is more subversive than, or maybe not even intent, but action. In action, it's either more subversive or it's an effective propaganda film. And considering that is one of the most best-selling movies of all time, and I think even more so than the Robert E. Lee statues that exist still there, is one who's created the identity of the South back then. It is an effective propaganda film.
I agree.
So one way or another, I think that you have to
You might
view it
not
as
like
successful.
that, but I think like I mean, yeah, I'm gonna give it a begrudging one for that.
Does that mean it's a good theme or a
Not a good.
If its theme
but
was in
called an effective
successful, yeah,
yes, exactly, yes, Sibo, yeah, for sure. It did its job, if that makes sense to you. Like, that's what it's trying to propagate, and it did that. Whether or not it's good, like,
it did do that
yeah,
with a lot of people.
Crash the Poor every chance it got. Like there was like, you know,
I wouldn't.
they did.
Yeah,
It was an extremely elitist film. I mean, their whole social circle. I mean, you understand, like, okay, if you weren't in this social circle and you were white trash, as opposed to anybody who wasn't.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Just you
Chris,
started
either,
at a level of trash, and however they served
I'm
you.
saying, it's not devoid of themes. It's just like the theme itself clearly, I think, or clearly comes across. Whether or not you can agree or disagree with it, you probably should disagree with it. But that's what it set out to do, and that's what it did. Like, as incorporated into its narrative, I guess.
So what would you say, like, if you're saying like it's a very clear what would you say the theme is stated clearly?
It's that this is like it actually, Steve, the film itself says it to you more clearly than I could, if I can remember it. The opening, like, not narration even, like the opening scroll is like, this is a civilization in a mindset, if you will, that is bygone. But it's trying to portray that. It's trying to like exemplify that specific I don't know what word do I want. I'm sorry. I'm struggling here. That specific environment and situation, and saying like, oh, it was so amazing, it was so glorified, and now it's gone. We'll never see this thing again. And that's what it's trying to like portray. Now again, whether or not you think that's a good thing, and I agree that it is not, like, it was what the details were that are ingrained in there, yes, are very troubling, are very we've moved beyond that. But nevertheless, the film itself, plus the novel, like plus the source material, I guess we'll say, it's not devoid of a theme. You don't have to agree with the theme.
I think it was very successful in what it was trying to say.
Well, I'm just trying to like reason it out.
Openly admit
Myself, right? Like outside of whether or not you agree with it, that's a whole other story.
Sure.
It's obviously a fucking racist movie. We'll talk about that at some point, but
no doubt.
The point we just made is the two characters that are essential to this movie do not embody Southern, like the Southern ideal, right?
I think one does. See, that's where I disagree.
Well, that's why I made the division there. If you agree with one, you have to give it a 1. If you don't agree with what I just said, you still have to give it a 1.
I'm gonna. I took some notes, and aside from the title crawl, because it wasn't just enough to throw this stuff; they had to continue to preach it with words. Basically, within the first 5 minutes, you find out it is implied heavily that a white guy on the plantation knocked up one of the slaves. And the woman said that the child...
It's like the first 20 minutes because everything is so drawn out in this fucking movie.
After 10 minutes of the overture and the
exactly.
and Dahlia O'Hara and Scarlett O'Hara.
That's what the skip button's for. Anyway,
no, I took this off of the I downloaded a free copy. I wasn't going to pay for this.
Okay.
They said the baby mercifully died.
The money goes to Lowe's theaters, and they kind of deserve it.
They openly admit the war was about slavery. They continually victimize the South. I mean, they're completely murdering themselves. They again with her first husband, the weakest of society dies from sickness, not on the glorious battlefield. Donating your wedding ring is the hardship of the rich and white. Slave auction, women, girls. Yeah, so I mean, as a propaganda film, it really worked. I mean, I'm because we've talked so much about themes, I kind of begrudgingly in a meta way have to give it a 1 because we've argued this. But Ian, to your point, as a loathsome propaganda film, out of all the things I've just mentioned, it's an effective propaganda film. The fact that people ate this shit up for 80 years and it's on this fucking thing obviously makes an effect.
Number 6.
Not only on the fucking list, but number 6. Jesus Christ!
You don't have to agree with the message, but it was effective at portraying the message it wanted to portray.
All right, I'll give it a 1.
That's my final argument.
Good call.
We browbeated you into it. Great.
Don't have to like it.
No, you made a very good point, and I was going to give it a 1 because I'm like, we discussed this so much, I have to give it a 1. But
all right, Chris, we'll keep talking about that with antagonists.
No, I thought.
I'll keep talking about that.
Sorry. Steve-O, that O looks like an S.
Who is the antagonist of this movie?
Yes.
The damn Yankees.
Scarlett O'Hara. I feel like is the fucking worst character in this, but you follow her, so I guess she's the protagonist.
She might be her own antagonist, but she's good.
Kind of what is it? The loss of the South? Like, am I supposed to fucking?
It's Gone with the Wind.
Like the Yankees taking the South away from the Confederates.
Yeah, the loss of the racist.
I don't
culture.
know. I don't feel like there's any like really good antagonists in this. Like, I feel like Scarlett O'Hara is antagonist by herself the entire fucking time because she's such a piece of shit. But I find it really fucking hard to give her any goddamn credit for that. There's this whole
about hardships.
What's that?
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Her shit gets taken away from her because she's, in the South. She happens to be in the South. Guess what? Everybody else in the South got shit taken away from them too, and I'm sure there were much better people than her there.
More damage than Scarlett.
It's Weltschmerz.
It's what?
Weltschmerz.
What does that mean?
German romantic ideal of the angst that is born from the world as it should be versus the world as it is. and Scarlett O'Hara is nothing if not plagued
She's caught
by
between
her ideal versus how reality has panned out.
Sure.
And the German romanticists know what they're talking about.
I hate her as a protagonist more than I hate her as herself being her own antagonist.
Yeah, I feel you. Like
I'm gonna give it a 0 for
I
sure.
pretty strongly agree with that. What do you think, Chris?
As I was saying before, I think the only thing that did more damage to the interpersonal lives of people is the actual Civil War. I mean, Scarlett O'Hara was a manipulative, vindictive. But in all honesty, she really did fucking manipulate everybody. To her credit, at least she was honest about it. Because
I have a question for you quickly, Chris. If the Civil War had never happened, would a similar plot line have borne out to her because she is an inherently terrible person?
I feel like she would have been more shitty without the Civil War.
I was gonna say, I'm sure there's plenty of narratives that have a Scarlett O'Hara type that is not beholden to the Civil War.
She was really shitty after she got humbled, but she would have been even worse if she had never been humbled by like being poor, right? Like, I don't know. It's her as a character reflects everything about the protagonist and the antagonist in this entire movie, and the antagonist is super soft because it's her and maybe the Civil War, like fucking her,
Civil
like
War
making her a better person, but not that good of a person.
But here's the thing: is I had no doubt that she was antagonized through the entire movie, whether she was 16 on the plantation, whether she was the poor or turned into a farmhand, whether she was married to a probably billionaire nowadays. She's still antagonized. I felt her being upset because I don't think she'd be happy under any state. That doesn't mean I'm going to give her a 1 for protagonist, but she was antagonized through the entire thing, whether right or not.
Certainly, she felt assaulted by society and happenstance, like the changing circumstances, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, again, like this might be one in which I give it a somewhat begrudging 1 because yes, it's not devoid of it. And yeah, Steve-O, I get it. Like I see your point. Like Civil War as the backdrop, like that was just like sort of like icing on the cake, I guess I want to say, to this character's experiences anyways.
Yeah, it is almost something that almost didn't affect her for a long time. Because even when she's walking amongst the bodies of the soldiers to go find a doctor so that her stepsister can give birth. Like, it's almost as if none of it actually affected her. And the minute it starts affecting her, she leaves.
That's exactly what I mean. That's why I don't think that I'm going to give antagonist a 1.
Fair enough. Because
the antagonism of the Civil War, what have you, whatever it is, like at any point in this movie, doesn't actually really change her character arc. She, like, you get flashes of changes, and then she's still fucking shitty. And I'm like, why are you still shitty? Like I saw you were changing. I thought you were like growing as a character, but it turns out you're not. You're still the same fucking shitty character. The antagonist hasn't fucking affected you at all.
Yeah, if anything, she becomes a worse person from her experiences.
God damn you! Like, I mean, I'm gonna speak more about that, but I think at least for my final score for antagonist, I'm giving it a decent-ish, softer, maybe 1, but still 1 because I felt as if she was antagonized by a number of factors, whether internal or external, and whether bloated or not.
It's an episode of Bridezilla. Like, you shouldn't be upset by any of this, but like I feel that you're actually upset by it's first world problems. Oh, the movie,
the film.
Yeah.
Would you say that in Bridezilla, the antagonist of the bride should deserve a fucking 1 for this fucking score?
I probably would, like I'm going to do with this one, give a 0 to the protagonist, but a 1 to the antagonist.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, 1 for the antagonist. Chris, what do you think?
So.
I think she's a villain. but I see her as the cause of her own misery. So I'm really on the fence because on the one hand she's a villain, and on the other hand, I'm gonna give her a 0. Actually,
Fair enough.
I don't have any sympathy for her at all whatsoever. I have more sympathy for her victims, but nobody's. We'll get to this with supporting, but I don't really. No,
I think I've fallen in love with a lot of Scarlett O'Hara's in my time, so I'm very sympathetic with it.
Biasing you.
Well, anyway, Scott, enough about me. Talk about Scarlett O'Hara.
Speaking of Katie Scarlett O'Hara, I mean, like, here's the thing, and I've always like this is like the second or third time I've seen Gone with the Wind, and I never enjoyed it. It was okay at best. I saw it once for a film class, just a backdrop, and I was telling you guys like precast or earlier that it's almost like if you know my feelings about Jimmy Stewart films, it's like the same kind of deal. So yeah, and I'm not going to use any derogative terms, but she's a spoiled brat, and she starts out as such, and just basically remains that, but adapts it to each situation that comes at hand. So yeah, she's a grating, annoying character. Like, and I get it. Like, the film clearly wants you to like sympathize with her. It's trying its best, but it just doesn't work. And like, I don't remember the actress' name. She was a famous actress at the time. Like, was well known. I'm sorry,
Vivian Lee.
you know, yeah. So like, she plays it well, but she almost like she plays it too well because the script, like, in the source material, that's how it paints that character. So yeah, it's great that she like sticks to it, like nails it. That's nice, but narratively and especially protagonist-wise, I can't. Nobody should be sympathizing with this character, and the film again, like I said, tries so hard and wants you to do that so badly, but it doesn't work. So, and it also ties into other questions we're both previously and which we're about to get to. But either way, I'm giving her a 0 just because of the fact that there's no arc. It's not, instead of an arc, it's a flat fucking line.
There is an arc. She is affected. She, if anything, because she goes from naive to the wicked stepmother, and
I think she becomes like. All right, sorry. In my mind, she was always like a young wicked stepmother, and like then grows into that role and never changes. Like, literally, the last part, like the very last fucking moment of the film is like, oh, I'm gonna do what I've always done. I'm going to manipulate and connive my way to get back into Brett's life. And that's what she's always done throughout the whole film. So like, maybe that her character is consistent. Sure. Don't get me wrong. Like, yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean she's a good character or a sympathetic one or one. Again, she learns nothing, adapts nothing. Should go back to do Black Hole and return to nothing because it's just a flat line to me. I'm sorry, E. If there is an arc, it's like the most minor arc ever in the world. Like if you imagine it as a math, like if you graph it, if you will.
I think
so
you're
that's
both.
How I view it. So
I think you're both kind of right to an extent, but like I think that what it is like there are moments where they like explicitly say, here's the arc, and then they fall back into the previous, like, and it falls back into the previous
bad narrative
moments. Like there are moments where the writer, whoever fucking wrote this, wanted to say like, oh, here's an arc, but then it's like, oh, but 5 minutes later you're like using the same manipulative tactics that you were using like in the very beginning. There's always like this like show of a character arc and never the completion of it, I think.
No,
like,
fair enough. That's
really what bugged me
said.
about it was like, I was like, oh, okay. There's these moments where it's like when she becomes poor and like has to work her old family plot or whatever, right? And like
that would be the most interesting
out there working the field. And if after that she had shown some character growth, that would be great.
Exactly.
I feel like during that time, she was like, hey, like, here's what I had to do to like survive. And then like after that, it was like, oh, here's how my fucking mind has changed. That would be terrific. But it's like, oh, here's what I had to do to
not
survive.
the case,
And
right?
then, oh, I'm here I'm the same. Like, why the like what the fuck? You're the same fucking person. Like, this is shown basically that just women can't learn from their fucking experiences.
For sure.
Or at least
That's what it feels like
this character specifically.
to me.
I don't
And,
want to
like,
broadwash women or anything, but
Your point, Steve.
No, I'm
The
not
film
talking
did,
about
so-
women. I'm talking about the writer of this fucking movie.
I understand.
But like to your
Go to
point,
Chris.
so like the times we're supposed to consider her like noble aspirations, it's like working on your own farm to save your farm is not noble. It is
if the land is the most important thing.
However, and I'm going to say is like when two other of the women, I couldn't keep track of who was who. I just really didn't care that much. Like, Scarlett, look at you. Look at your hands. You're going to be hands. You're just like a field hand or something like that. I'm like,
That was Clark Gable in the jail who
Was
said that.
oh, Jesus, I can't remember.
It was Rhett Butler.
That certainly
When in
was.
jail, he's like, you said that you're fucking rich, but
Wait,
you're
so-
not. Look at your hands.
But that was her minute. She was like, "Oh, we're doing great. Like the farm is great. Like Tara's okay." And she's like, "I ain't." Like he just called her out.
Yeah.
But I mean, it exemplifies her manipulative nature. I guess I want to say.
So yeah, I think we all kind of agree on this point. So it's zeros all around.
Yeah.
It is for me.
So Chris, tell us about your favorite character, supporting character in this.
There were supporting characters in it. Like Rhett Butler amused me. I didn't like him, but he amused me because, well, the thing is, I mean, like, all right, for the first half of the film, he amused me. I enjoyed him walking around, especially like when the Yankees are marching in and he's having like some little soiree up there and he's in his jacket and he's just like, you know, with his cigar, like it's like
him being a scallywag.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's just like, God needs you. It's just like, okay. I mean, I liked his ambivalence at the beginning. Mammy was about the closest thing to a voice of reason, but it was still at the service of Scarlett's ego. So those are the only two that I'm going to say one thing. There is a younger woman, one of the slaves, and Beth pointed this out to me that when they're shooting the scene, they originally wanted her to hit this young woman, and she told Vivian Lee, "If you hit me, I am not going to react. I'm going to stay stoic. So if you want me to do what this scene requires me, you have to pretend to hit me." And you can obviously tell that she missed her by a mile. That was just like an interesting anecdote.
Is that Prissy?
Yes.
Yeah, Prissy. Other than that, yeah, everybody else is kind of mushed, except for Ashley, because we had to keep bringing him into it. But really, everybody who wasn't a caricature. So, because obviously O'Malley, O'Hara, McDonald over there,
Lord O'Tara.
that stereotype. If you were a stereotype, you would probably stand out for the wrong reasons. This is a difficult one because two of the characters amuse me, but I really wouldn't give them much.
I actually love Rhett Butler as a character. Yes, he commits marital rape. That I'll get that out of the way. Terrible for that. But in general, his aside from 10% of the film, I think he's a fantastic character. On the other hand, there are supporting characters in this which you're like, oh my, cringe-worthy performances. It reminds me, there's a Key and Peele sketch where he's like, my father was attempting to be an actor, and I found footage from back in the day. I haven't looked at it yet, and it's him, like actor. Yeah, you have to do. But I felt that the older black woman, Mama or whatever, Mammy, she's actually rolling her eyes not only at the characters in there as she was supposed to,
The
but
actual
at
movie
the
she's
things she
in.
had to say.
Yeah, I
Like,
noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
and
kind of got
it's
that. I
like-
kind of got that feeling too. Like I don't know how to feel about her character because like she was somewhat bold and like said shit that you probably weren't supposed to say. If you're a black character and just after the Civil War, but like also very
Also,
racist depiction of the character.
1939
And
is
like
not
Prissy
after-
was the worst. Like
Yes.
I cringed so hard at all of the shit that like she was supposed to say.
the male slave that they had also had
Yeah.
some pretty
Oh, my God.
painful dialogue in
It
there.
was just fucking brutal. I just looked up the woman that played Prissy. Butterfly McQueen was her name, and she was an actor until 1989. And it's the weirdest thing. Her final acting gig was in the magical world of Disney as a character called Miss Priss. It's so fucking weird.
Yeah.
But like that same thing. Like I just can't. I cannot give supporting characters a 1. Like I like Rhett Butler to an extent, as you said, like with definite caveats. But like there were so many characters that were like just,
I got the vapors. Like
my eyes were like
everything.
rolling into the back of my fucking head. Like I was cringing as hard. Like my face like sucked in like a fucking lemon. I was like cringing so hard. So I cannot give supporting characters a 1 in good conscience or good faith. So I got to give this a 0.
I don't know, man, because like I'm gonna talk it out because I think Melanie or Melly,
Melly, yeah.
Scarlett's sister-in-law, like she was like by far at least the most moral and like at least well-meaning person. She had no agenda. She really didn't have allegiance to the South. Like she was trying to do good and like do right by people and help people, and she ends up like dying for like the film basically writes her out of it.
The doctor was pretty badass too.
Yeah, like Doctor was
Yeah.
fun. Like so, like I guess I want to say, like, on one hand, the surrounding characters like fill out the world. Like yeah, for sure. Like they make it a believable scenario, I guess. Like in the antebellum and so forth, like that setting. But like, which ones? It's really tough because it's a coin flip almost because all the points you guys just said, Steve-O, like. And on top of that, like, yeah, that's the other side of the coin for me, like, where it's just cringeworthy portrayals, and that's a large problem with this film for sure, and in general. But some of them, like, they're believable and they make sense and they fill out the world. So I don't know, like, that's where
If I may give a slight
Yes,
point
for sure.
against, you're right. Melly is probably the most like likable character in this. What really bugged me about it is like I'm fairly certain that she was in love with Scarlett, which is why she let her get away with so much. And
Yeah,
this
I
movie
mean,
just like
I didn't even read that. I couldn't.
takes
I did
the-
not get that.
I mean, I
I'm
think
not saying
that, I
you're
think that
wrong.
you can definitely read that into it. Like
That's
not
fair.
necessarily that they thought that when they were writing it, but like she
No one
forgives
wants to
Scarlett.
marry their cousin.
Yeah, exactly. She forgives Scarlett for everything. She's married to her cousin, not out of love. Like, right? Like, there's
Out
all
of like
kinds
rote,
of like little things that are like, maybe she's not exactly
Sure.
what she appears.
like I get you.
And the problem with that is that, or like, this is like maybe an early version of like, you kill the gay that like that's in the movie,
Like
right?
barrier
Like,
gaze. Yeah.
not that I don't like her character, but I don't like what they did with her character per se.
Well, I think that the racist characters in this are like whether there's an implication of things there. It's legitimately the portrayal of the racist racism in here, which is gives a definite default 0 to me.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, and the last thing I have to say, like,
Completely
Red
agree.
Butler, Clark Gable as Red is like, he's the most interesting man in the world, like, in the world. So, like, I mean, it's amusing to me in that sense, and like, not that it's difficult because I don't dislike him as a character, but yeah, what they had him do, like what his character actually does, is troubling. It's problematic for sure. So like again, like that's why I wasn't sure like how to cut this one up. So I'm still like, it's legit on the razor's edge. So Chris or anyone else, if you have anything else to say,
So what are you giving it? 0 for me.
Chris.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. But because to be honest with you, except for, and I forgot about the doctor, everybody just kind of meshed into one another, unless you're Hattie McDaniel. I honestly, it's probably going to be a softer 0, but it's definitely going to be a 0. I just, like I said, it's like I don't. No.
So what are you decided upon? If you want to give it a 1, give it a 1.
It's
Give it a
super
1, man.
close. It might be like a 0.5, like a 0.51, rounded up to a 1
Sure.
in a sense, but like in the softest way possible, just because like they're not devoid of characterization, and while what they represent again might be, socially and culturally like not cool anymore for sure, it within the narrative they do fit in there. So
They're great propaganda characters.
Yeah.
Steve-O, by the way, your green screen is slightly off, and I can't not
Oh,
see.
no.
Put it back.
Hey, it works.
There we go.
Put that south
Sorry.
back.
The minute I noticed it, I couldn't stop looking at it. All right, it's on to me with dialogue, and this is actually fairly difficult because there is some terrible dialogue in here, but there's some, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn level of dialogue.
My dear, some great dialogue.
That might be there are some I love Humphrey Bogart as an actor, and there's some Humphrey Bogart Casablanca level
stuff.
dialogue in this, and then there's some oh lordy dialogue in there which made me go, oh Lord, what am I watching?
Yeah.
And I might be like you were on supporting, I might have to, because I think that partly, yes, there is the racial overtones in this. However, there are elements of the dialogue that have transcended the initial intent of this work and have embedded itself culturally beyond what the intention was. So I might have to give it a 1.
You know, it's funny. Like, I am more staunchly like this one's not as difficult to me. I think it's a 0.6 versus a 0.4. That is to say, 0.6 for a 0, like 60%, 40%, if that makes sense. And like, yes, it certainly the characters were saying things that fit in again to the world and the setting, into like the general like opus or the source material. Like, I don't know offhand 100%, but I would conjecture to you, my friends, that a lot of it was adapted directly from the novel.
Yeah,
So like that's fine and all, but a lot of it was just like they're not bog standard, but it keeps it moving along. There were some interactions, yes, that were like engaging, but even the frankly my dear don't give a damn line, like even knowing that, like I knew what it was, like it's a very famous thing, like it, and even having been so parodied and so like mocked and stuff, I'm trying to like, upon watching it this time, trying to just keep it in line with the narrative itself and like the relative to the storylines and characters. It's just not that effective to me. So I'm leaning on a softer 0, but probably a 0. And yeah, like a lot of like the uncomfortable portrayals are going into this for sure. And that's I can't ignore that. Nobody should. But even putting that aside just for a moment, just to analyze like what is said between characters, it's few and far between in which I thought the dialogue was engaging. The rest of it is just flat. It goes along. It says what it says, and that's all. It doesn't do anything else. Never aside again from like the famous line. Aside from that, I thought like some of the title cards were like better than the actual.
I love a good title card too.
Yeah,
So.
like maybe like the title cards get more credit, but like I mean towards a soft zero or like softer or end or into solid zero for dialogue. So with that, go ahead, my friends.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 or 3 like solid immortal lines in this, right? Like, and you can't take that away. My problem comes with the like all the rest of the dialogue, like the in between lines.
Yeah, exactly. So everything
And
else
like there are so many characters that are written so sloppily and lazily and fucking just like they're not characters, that it takes away from all the rest of the dialogue, the good dialogue, right? That is written in here.
Yeah, I think you're saying
because those characters look like as less than fucking people for the most part. Any line that any black person says in this is like the most lazy fucking bullshit writing that I've ever fucking seen in anything, and like I can't fucking forgive that. So like, you know, there are a couple great lines that characters get, mostly Clark Gable as Rhett Butler gets a couple good lines, but like, you know what, that doesn't take away from the fact that there is a lot of lazy writing in this movie, and sorry, fuck you for that. So like, I'm gonna give it a 0 as well.
I think it's pretty much where I'm at. So good.
Yeah.
Lazy dialogue, sloppily delivered, devoid. No, this was a no-brainer to me. This is getting a 0 because, especially in the second half, where you have at least the first half, it was all character stuff, and you were going through social thing to the burning of Atlanta, whatever. And the second half was just this dialogue with nothing else to distract you. I mean, there was nothing else really to distract you. So yeah, this is a no-brainer. I'm giving it a 0.
Okay, well, Steve-O, so talk about the style of this.
Yeah, I think that the style of this, if we're looking at just visual style, is
cinematography, we'll say. Right?
I think that there are a lot of really great shots in this movie, and I think it's honestly one of the strongest parts of the film is the visual storytelling and the visual style of it. I think that the music is actually pretty good too, though it's really sometimes really rough to like. I will admit I skipped through the intro and the overture and
It's the best part of the film.
Yeah, yeah. There was nothing horribly offensive in that part anyway. But you know, I'll probably end up giving style a 1 unless I hear a good verses. But yeah, I found a lot of the shots to be really impressive, and the visual storytelling in scenes that were supposed to be affecting was really affecting where it wanted to be, and I took that away from my viewing. So
yeah, I'm gonna generally agree with you that like yes, the visual, specifically cinematography, is still holds up and looks pretty good, pretty like damn impressive for sure. I think I guess if we're gonna like analyze it like a bit more, like that's not the entire reason, but a large part of the reason why this film was selected to be in the AFI. Now, whether or not it should be on number 6 or whatever, we can argue about that. It shouldn't, of course. That's my. But I'm saying like,
Bring back Birth of a Nation and take this up.
No, well, but it's not.
But do the right thing up
But
there.
I'm saying, I feel like that
I agree.
that is a factor in which it was selected for, because yes, there were impressive shots, Evo. Yeah, the vistas and so forth looked really good. Now, in terms of the soundtrack, there's one thing I wanted to mention before I turn it over to you guys. Like, it has a sweeping, like, of course, like orchestral, like romantic, like motif to it, but it never stops the whole movie. Like, if you notice that, like, it's happening every fucking scene. So, like,
Because that's what
Yeah,
Scarlett O'Hara's going
man.
but
through.
You
it
can't-
becomes like I guess, like, maybe, sure, like that's what they intended it to be, but when, like, if it happens every single time, like, it just becomes background shit. Like, eventually I started ignoring. I'm like, oh well, it's happening every scene anyway, so, like, what's the difference? So I guess, again, I'm going to give it officially a 1, like, just over the line. More specifically because of the cinematography of it. Yes, it's iconic. Whether or not it's troublesome, otherwise, we've addressed a lot about that. But all I'm saying is, like, in terms of the way the film is shot, sure, the style is fine and somewhat affecting and something to be studied. Like, again, the first time I ever saw this film was in a film class in college to break down film, so I'll give it that.
And to
much credit.
pad out the course.
Probably yes.
Yeah,
Well, you needed a 4-hour film, right?
Well, we did it in 2 sections, but all I'm saying is, like, yeah, like
Exactly.
like the famous shot of Scarlett, like on the farm, like when dusk is settling and, like, it's like and she's in silhouette, like, yeah, and there's other things like that, sure. So if nothing else, I'll give the film credit on style for that front, and that is all.
I kind of agreed. I initially, with regard to the music, I think the orchestrations are pretty well done. Again, it's the same thing pretty much played over and over again, except for the adaptations.
Yes, thank you, Chris.
Johnny Come Home, Camp Down Races, all those Song of the South kind of shit.
Dixie and all that crap.
And then, but the thing is, I agree with you to a lot of the cinematography, but I felt like he kept coming back, and I'm sure he's gonna, they would say, like, oh yeah, we're trying to create this theme of, silhouettes in front of a dawn or whatever. But like I said, the first hour and 10 minutes of this film flew by. I really got a lot of the cinematography, and then except for those, like, scoping scenes that he'd already established, it really didn't. So I'm probably gonna end up at the end of the day probably giving this a soft one, because I have to give credit where credit is due. But I'm gonna say basically all the styles in the first hour and 10 minutes. After that, it's just more of the same, or actually less of the same, especially in the second half. But I'm gonna give credit where credit is due, and
Sure.
I'm gonna give it a 1.
Yeah, if nothing else, like, it's good enough for that, I would say. So
Yeah, it's going to get a soft 1. It's not going to be praised or anything.
I'm giving it a 0 because 2 reasons. One, actually, things I brought up before. One, it's adaptation of a novel to film that didn't quite work. And 2, it's racist as fuck. Whether not just against Africans, against Irish, against Southerners. It offends everyone, and not in a
except something.
broad comedy way. So yeah.
I mean, that's fair. I guess we're reversing. So, like, I took a point away from plot, and you put a point into plot. I guess we're reversing it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I get you.
Yeah. I think I took my points away in other places. I can appreciate the look of something in terms of style, but I get exactly what you mean. In terms of that, Ian. So I get you,
Ian, because I was really talking myself into giving this one, because I said in the first hour and 10 minutes was the aesthetic style of the
It's
film.
impressive enough, and then it's
wait, so you're giving it a 0 officially?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm going to leave that point out of it, but
Damn it, you made my math difficult now.
but I was really
Okay.
intense about this, and you pushed me back to a 0. So yay!
Yeah.
You pushed me to a 1 before, and you pushed me to a 0 here. So there you go.
Well done. You argue too well.
Scott, Do you recommend Gone with the Wind?
I do not. See how it blows? Yep, it sure blows. It should never ever be. At least once upon a time, I guess I could see why it was put on the AFI at all. And number's fucking 6. No fucking way. If you're gonna have it on, put it at number 98, number 9, or something like that. And I think at this point, it legit can go away from the list. I get it. Like it, you might academically make an argument saying like it's culturally relevant. Sure, maybe, but I can name for you right now, if you put a gun to my head, name 5 films that could fill in the spot. I could do it. So at this point, I don't. It's 4 hours long. It's bloated. It's pretentious. Like all the positive things like that or might be in this film, we already said, and it is not worth it to be on the AFI or just watch in general. So no.
Yeah.
Big fat 0. Probably the biggest 0 for me.
Yeah. So listen, if this movie had ended with Rhett and Scarlett going out in the burning of Atlanta, tragically, 1 hour and 45 minutes into the movie,
Well, okay. I
would have been like, "This is an all right movie, not worthy of the top 100, but certainly much better than it ended up being." I remember like seeing that, like, so like the burning of Atlanta is right before the intermission, and like seeing it and be like, just die, like just wishing, just die. And I knew I had 2 hours left in the movie to go. I was like, just fucking die. And
the shot of Scarlett on the farm in the silhouette when like she's like having to do her work, I was like, perfect. End it now. Like that would be a good like edit, like a cut, yo.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna give this a 0. I don't recommend anybody watch it. It's not. There's so many other better movies. It doesn't deserve to be in the top 100, let alone number fucking 6 for some reason.
Agreed.
I guess it just has this like this history of being this like movie that everybody fucking loves for some reason.
It's one of the most successful movies of all time.
Great. I wish that so many other movies were more successful than this one, but yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it. People fucking loved it. And people continue to pass it down to kids and have their kids watching shit. Like, honestly, I watched this when I was a kid, and, you know, like, I'm sure my parents were like, look, this is one of the best movies of all time. Without, you know.
Is it
I have a story. I saw my dad, we were reviewing this, and he unironically said something. And that's the key thing. It's unironically. Like, well, that black slave woman in there, she was the inspiration of Miss Buttersworth. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem.
Is that a good thing?
Lies the issue, Dad.
Yeah.
And Hattie McDaniel is also George Clooney's justification for how progressive Hollywood was, because she won an Oscar for her best supporting character role.
Jesus Christ.
Seriously.
Anyway,
hold on a second. Do I recommend it? No.
0 ball.
Do I think it should be on the AFI? No. Do I think it should be canceled? No.
That's a fair point. I thought you might get to that as well.
Yeah, it's weird because I understand the historical importance of this, but it doesn't mean we have to elevate this beyond a footnote in history. And I think it deserves that. It deserves with an asterisk, and so I'm not recommending it because I think that even like if you go back to like Charlie Chaplin film and earlier films than this, there were broader scopes than this film earlier than it.
Exactly.
And
absolutely.
I'm sure even the fucking railroad one we saw, the General
with Buster Keaton.
Yeah.
It was a point I was going to make. Go on.
Yeah, but like that has, I think, as equal, if not more relevance than this does in the history
Holds
of
up
cinema.
much better than fucking Gone with the Wind.
Even though it did still have a southern viewpoint. Anyway,
but no, I was going to say one thing is because like I said to you before, I was always told about the spectacle of Atlanta burning, and that was the most boring escape
scene.
But it made me think of the General, because I'm sitting here going, the general was those train scenes were much more exciting and much more. How the hell did they do that?
And in fact, they put it over twice. And
All over this film.
anyway, so I'm gonna go with the scores.
What does it leave us at?
Well, Scott, you and I were on the same page for this with a 5.
All right.
Steve-O, you gave it
It's
a
average.
3, and Chris, you gave it a 2.
Damn.
You get a
Son.
3.75 overall. So
Yeah. I mean, again, overbloated. It's we move beyond what it's trying to do, and I think it can go away from the AFI and be replaced with something better, much better, especially at number 6. So you heard it here first, folks.
anyway, I'm Jonathan Manzer here with Scott Thurlow,
Over the rainbow, my friends.
Chris Morgan,
Good night.
and Stephen Rossi.
Bye.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.